Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are going to do a course passage here, which is from today, January 3rd. Let's get through this one. Okay, let's start. Blind and dumb criticism. Critics of books or drama often use one of two arguments. The first consists in suddenly deciding that the true subject of criticism is ineffable, and criticism, as a consequence, is unnecessary. These critics act as if the highest task of a critic is to proclaim that criticism is useless. The other, which also reappears periodically, consists in confessing that one is too stupid, too unenlightened to understand a supposedly philosophical work of art. So the second one is that one is too stupid to understand a philosophical work of art. A play by Henri Lefebvre on Kierkegaard has thus provoked in our best critics a pretended confession of idiocy, the aim of which was obviously to discredit Lefebvre by relegating him to the ridicule of pure intellectualism. Why do critics thus periodically proclaim their helplessness or their lack of understanding? Critics are always the most confident when claiming ignorance. It is certainly not out of modesty. No one is more at ease than a critic confessing that he understands nothing about existentialism. No one more self-assured than another admitting shamefacedly that he does not have the luck to have been initiated into the philosophy of the extraordinary. This admission suggests that a critic has such sureness of intelligence that acknowledging an inability to understand calls in question the clarity of the author and not that of the critic's own mind. Critics feign ignorance to dismiss authors or their works. One mimics ignorance in order to make the public judge a book harshly and place oneself in its favor. This carries ignorance along advantageously from complicity in helplessness to complicity in intelligence. The reality behind this seasonally professed lack of culture is the old myth. The reality behind this seasonally professed lack of culture is the old myth according to which ideas are noxious if they are not controlled by common sense and feeling. Knowledge is evil. They both grew on the same tree. Critics earn their keep by convincing readers that certain authors lack common sense appeal. Culture is allowed on condition that it periodically proclaims the vanity of its ends and the limits of its power. To be a critic by profession and to proclaim that one understands nothing about philosophies like existentialism or Marxism is to elevate one's blindness or dumbness to a universal rule of perception and to reject from the world Marxism and existentialism. I don't understand existentialism or Marxism, and if you claim to understand or support them, then you are idiots. But if one fears or despises so much the philosophical foundations of a book, and if one demands so insistently the right to understand nothing about them and to say nothing on the subject, why become a critic? To understand, to enlighten, that is your profession, isn't it? You can, of course, judge philosophy according to common sense. The trouble is that while common sense and feeling understand nothing about philosophy, philosophy, on the other hand, understands both perfectly. It means nothing to judge philosophy by common sense when it is philosophy's job to judge common sense. You don't explain writers of philosophical works, but they can explain you, can understand you and the way you think. Critics don't want to understand the play by Lefebvre, the Marxist, but you can be sure that Lefebvre, the Marxist, understands critics' incomprehension perfectly well. Yet this old romantic couple, the heart and the head, has no reality except in these opiate-like philosophies, which have always in the end constituted the official position of fascist political regimes, and in which one gets rid of intellectuals by telling them to run along and get on with the emotions and the ineffable. This is a heavy passage. It is honestly very hard to understand the message of the author, but let's read the questions and see how we can answer them. But the main idea of the passage is that the author is trying to say that, let me think how to put it in one sentence. So definitely he's talking about criticism and critics, and the fact that the job of the critic is very tricky in a sense that you don't want to be an ignorant critic, and at the same time you don't want to be a silent critic. You want to have something to say, but at the same time so here the author says that critics tell the readers that certain authors lack common sense. So the author's attitude towards critics is most accurately described as sympathetic, neutral, uncertain, unhappy. So the author says that critics use one of the two arguments. The first is that criticism is unnecessary. The first consists in suddenly deciding that the true subject of criticism is ineffable and criticism is unnecessary. These critics act as if the highest task of a critic is to proclaim that criticism is useless. The other, which also reappears periodically, consists in confessing that one is too stupid, too unenlightened to understand a supposedly philosophical work of art. So a play gives an example of a play by Henry Lefebvre, has thus provoked in our best critics a pretended confession of idiocy, the aim which was obviously to discredit Lefebvre by relegating him to the ridicule of pure intellectualism. So basically, the author is saying that Lefebvre's work was way too smart, way too intellectual for the readers, for the critics to even understand it, which also appears periodically, consisting confessing that one is too stupid. Then the author asks why do critics thus periodically proclaim their helplessness or their lack of understanding. Critics are always the most confident when claiming ignorance. So they confidently claim ignorance. It is certainly not out of modesty. No one is, so it's a sarcasm, right? So it's not from modesty that critics claim ignorance. No one is more at ease than a critic confessing that he understands nothing about existentialism. No one more self-assured than another admitting shamefacedly that he does not have the luck to have been initiated into the philosophy of the extraordinary. So the author is saying that because critics are there to criticize the work, they basically are at the best position to say that, oh, I didn't understand what I read, so the writer did not do a good job. This admission suggests that a critic has such sureness of intelligence that acknowledging an inability to understand calls in question the clarity of the author and not that of the critic's own mind. So they basically blame the author of the work, not their own mind as the critic. Critics feign ignorance to dismiss authors or their works. You don't need to know the meaning of feign. You can say that they kind of embrace ignorance to dismiss the author or their work. So one mimics it. So we can see that the author's attitude towards critics is so it's not neutral. It's negative. It's also not sympathetic. We can see if it's uncertain, but it's more unhappy. It's not about certainty. So one mimics ignorance in order to make the public judge a book harshly and place oneself in its favor. This carries ignorance along advantageously from complicity in helplessness to complicity in intelligence. So these critics use ignorance to their own advantage, from a place of being complacent in helplessness, not being helpless, to a place of intelligence. The reality behind this seasonally professed lack of culture is the old myth according to which ideas are noxious if they are not controlled by common sense feeling. Knowledge is evil. They both grew on the same tree. Critics earn their keep by convincing readers that certain authors lack common sense. Culture is allowed on condition that it periodically proclaims the vanity of its ends and the limits of its power. To be a critic by profession and to proclaim the one. So for this question, we can answer that it's unhappy, and that is the correct answer. The passage suggests that critics attempt to do their readers. Keep readers from feeling uneasy about difficult works. Encourage their readers to avoid certain texts. Encourage them to only read works that are easy to understand. Convince them to learn more about philosophy. It would be more of the third option. Let's read the first one again. Keep readers from feeling uneasy about difficult works. That could also be a good answer. Encourage them to only read works that are easy to understand. I like the first one better since this is saying only. Encourage their readers to avoid certain texts. Yeah, I don't know why. The author seems to be trying to understand what a critic has to know to be a critic. The author seems to be trying to understand what a critic has to know to be a critic, the relationship between critics and authors, the relationship between critics and readers, why critics behave in a certain way. That is the correct answer. The passage describes an irony of criticism. namely that philosophical books are meant to teach us about ourselves but are hard to understand. Critics gain authority by claiming to lack mastery over what they critique. That's a good one. Those who read philosophical works ignore critics who write about those works. Publishers keep printing books that critics either dismiss or outright attack. The choice B is what's most familiar with this passage. Which of the following beliefs would be most in agreement with the theme of the passage? People do not enjoy feeling that like they are ignorant. Good readers should challenge themselves. We trust people who acknowledge their limitations. Deception is not wrong if it does not hurt anyone. So which of the following beliefs would be most in agreement with the theme of the passage? We trust people who acknowledge their limitations. These people do not enjoy feeling like they are ignorant. Good readers should challenge themselves. This would be the most, I believe. We trust people who acknowledge their limitations. Is it about acknowledging limitations or? Okay, let's see why. This is the answer. The main idea of the passage is that critics claim ignorance in order to dismiss an author or their work. So the main idea is that critics use ignorance to dismiss an author's work. Claim ignorance in order to dismiss an author's work. This question wants us to identify this most in line with the main idea. The main idea is this. Okay. People do not enjoy feeling like they are ignorant. We might be drawn to this idea based on the discussion in paragraph 4. There, the author says that ideas are noxious if they are not controlled by common sense and feeling. However, this answer choice goes beyond passage information. The author does not discuss what people enjoy or don't enjoy. They do not say whether critics or people enjoy feeling ignorant. Furthermore, the question wants us to identify the statement that agrees with the theme of the passage. The main idea is that critics claim ignorance in order to dismiss an author or their work. This is not clearly related to how people feel. This answer choice goes beyond the information in the passage. So that was my guess to you. It's not about enjoying the feeling. Even so, critics do enjoy the feeling of being ignorant. That's kind of what we understood from the passage. What I chose was good readers should challenge themselves. This is not about readers too. It's more about critics, right? And immediately I can see what could be wrong with this answer. It's not about this passage is not about the readers. It's about so let's see. We might find this answer choice appealing because it seems to align with the passage discussion. The author argues that critics claim ignorance in order to dismiss an author's work. Paragraph 1 says that critics discredit authors for philosophical works. Paragraph 5 says critics reject philosophies and implies that readers should also reject them. Since the author has a negative view of critics, we may think that they would encourage readers to do the opposite of what critics want. This could include reading challenging books that critics would dismiss. However, the focus of the passage is not what critics do, not what readers should do. The author does not recommend any actions or suggest that readers should challenge themselves. Rather, they discuss the behavior of critics and its effect. The passage does not clearly support this answer. Option C is we trust people who acknowledge their limitations. This answer choice is correct because it is most in line with the main idea. The main idea is this. The passage suggests that when critics claim ignorance, it influences the actions of readers. Paragraph 3 says that when critics pretend to be ignorant, it makes the public judge a book harshly. Claiming ignorance places the critic in a position of favor. Acknowledging their inability does not cause readers to question the critic, rather, it has the opposite effect. So, by pretending to acknowledge their limits, critics gain the trust of the readers. This allows them to affect the reader's behavior. Thus, the passage suggests that we trust people who acknowledge their limitations. Critics pretend to acknowledge their limitations, which makes them influential among readers. We might not think this answer is correct because the author does not directly say it in the passage. However, this answer choice is closest to the author's main idea. It expresses what critics do and their effect on readers. Because of this, the answer choice is correct. And D, deception is not wrong if it does not hurt anyone. Yeah, it's not close to the passage. The passage suggests that critics attempt to do which to their readers. This question wants us to identify what critics try to do to their readers. We can use the main idea. We might find this answer choice appealing because the author says that critics feign ignorance to dismiss intellectual and philosophical works. So A was keep readers from feeling uneasy about difficult works. We may believe that critics do this because they are difficult to understand. If a critic claims that a book is difficult and lacks common sense, it might make a confused reader feel less uneasy about it. However, the author does not clearly suggest that critics are trying to make readers feel better about what they read. Rather, critics are trying to influence what readers do. In paragraph 3, they say critics pretend to be ignorant to make the public judge a book harshly. Paragraph 4 states that critics want to convince readers that some authors do not write common sense. So critics are attempting to affect the behavior of readers. The passage does not say they want readers to feel better about difficult works. There is not enough information to support this answer. Because of this, A is worse than B. This answer choice is most in line with the author's main idea. The main idea is that critics claim ignorance in order to dismiss an author. In paragraph 3, they say that critics do this to make the public judge a book harshly. In paragraph 4, they say that critics convince their readers that some books lack common sense appeal and that ideas without common sense are noxious. Paragraph 5 suggests that critics want to reject certain philosophies from the world. Paragraph 6 implies that critics fear or despise philosophical works. So critics claim ignorance to dismiss certain texts and make readers dismiss them. 2. To dismiss means to ignore or discard something. Thus, the passage suggests that critics attempt to get their readers to avoid certain books. Encourage them to only read works that are easy to understand. We might think this aligns with the main idea. In paragraph 1, it says that critics sometimes pretend that they are too stupid to understand philosophical works. We may take this to mean the critics encourage people to only read what is easy to understand. However, this answer choice goes beyond passage information. While the passage describes what critics do to get people to dismiss books, it does not talk about what books critics encourage people to read. Paragraphs 3 to 5 say that critics want us to dislike certain books. The passage does not talk about books critics want people to read. They do not discuss books they want people to like. The information in the passage does not support this answer. So C is worse than B. Let's see what others say. Okay, good. We covered it in 25 minutes, but it's tricky to get these questions right. If anyone has any, um, if anyone knows any ways that I could improve my cars, then please let me know. I would be happy to go with that method. But it's a comprehension uh, skill that I'm lacking, I believe. So I'm gonna practice more and try to improve myself in it.